There is a buried pipe under an ordinary suburban yard that holds the air inside a house at 55 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle of July. No compressor, no refrigerant, no electricity bill. Just dirt, a length of plastic pipe, and a physical law that the cooling industry has spent 50 years pretending does not exist. Your government wrote the complete construction blueprint in 1947, published it on federal letterhead, distributed it to agricultural extensions across 48 states, and then watched it quietly disappear from every major building guide written after 1960. That disappearance was not an accident. It has a name, a year, and a documented paper trail. And once you understand what 4 feet of soil actually does to the air moving through it, the idea of paying $740 every summer to run a machine becomes not just unnecessary, but genuinely offensive. Let's follow the physics. 4 feet below the surface of any yard in America, the soil holds a nearly constant temperature of 55 degrees Fahrenheit. It does this in July when the surface hits 105. It does this in January when the surface drops to -20. The ground does not care about either extreme. That stability has been measured on real installations across 3 continents for more than 50 years, and the numbers do not drift. The reason is not magic. It is 2 separate physical properties working together, and understanding both of them changes the way you think about the dirt under your lawn permanently. The first is thermal diffusivity. The surface of the earth heats and cools in a wave driven by the sun. In July, the top layer is roasted. In January, it freezes. But that temperature wave does not travel straight down into the soil at full strength. It weakens as it descends, and more importantly, it slows. For moist soil, the diffusivity value is approximately 0.5 millimeter squared per second. That number is small, and that smallness is exactly the point. A summer heat wave on the surface takes months to propagate down to 4 feet. By the time that July warmth actually reaches the pipe, it is already October and the surface has cooled back off. This means the soil around your buried pipe is, at every single moment of the year, running 6 months behind the weather above it. The cool air your pipe delivered to your living room on the 15th of July was not some vague background temperature. It was the previous February's cold, stored underground, and released in slow motion at precisely the moment you needed it most. Your backyard is not a freezer. It is a time machine. The second property is volumetric heat capacity. Moist soil stores roughly 2.5 megajoules of thermal energy per cubic meter for every single degree of temperature change. A trench 20 meters long, 1 meter wide, and 2 meters deep holds enough buffering capacity to absorb the output of a residential air conditioner running continuously for several hours. And because the thermal wave is always delayed by half a year, that capacity is never fully drained. The Ontario Courtright Centre ran continuous monitoring on 9 buried earth tubes through 8 full summers. Outside air entered the pipe on a 90-degree July afternoon. It exited at 59 degrees Fahrenheit, 31 degrees of cooling, no compressor, no refrigerant, and 0 efficiency loss across 8 consecutive seasons. The soil held every single time. This technology did not begin in a laboratory or a university research program. It began in the stone foundations of German farmhouses sometime in the early 1700s, carried forward by people who had no access to mechanical cooling and no patience for a problem that the ground had already solved for free. In 1897, a German architect named Heinrich Schaler, working in the Rhine Valley, published a technical paper on what he called the Erd Canal, the Earth Channel. Schaler documented underground air tempering tunnels running through the foundations of old German farmhouses, some of which had been in continuous operation for nearly 2 centuries. The physics he described in 1897 is identical to what the Ontario researchers measured 120 years later. Stable ground temperature at depth. Moving air captures that thermal energy. Longer tube means greater transfer. The geometry was different. The science was not. German-speaking settlers carried that knowledge to Pennsylvania in the early 1700s. Those settlers eventually became the Pennsylvania Amish. And in Lancaster County today, there are farmhouses still standing with their original clay pipe air systems intact inside the stone foundations. The clay has crumbled in some of them, but the pipe routes and intake openings remain visible in the walls. The Amish did not preserve this out of nostalgia. They preserved it because it works, because it costs nothing to operate, and because it answers to no utility company in any season. Walk into one of those Holmes County farmhouses on a 95-degree August afternoon, and the air inside is cool, still, and quiet. No humming machine anywhere in the walls. An older farmer once described it in 4 words: the ground is the cooler. He was not speaking metaphorically. The air in his kitchen had traveled 40 feet through a clay pipe buried 5 feet under his garden and arrived 20 degrees cooler than the afternoon outside. The federal government knew all of this. In 1947, the United States Department of Agriculture published Farmer's Bulletin, number 1918, titled Ventilation of Farm Buildings. Inside that document is a complete section on underground air inlets. Burial depth, pipe diameter, intake placement, slope requirements for drainage. Plain language, imperial and metric dimensions, side by side. Distributed to agricultural extensions across 48 states. A 15-cent publication that handed every farmer in America a free cooling system. Then it vanished from every major building guide written after 1960. And the timing of that disappearance is not random. Americans spend roughly $29 billion every year running residential air conditioning. The combined heating and cooling equipment industry in the United States pulls in over $200 billion annually. That number includes the original sale of each unit, the repair cycle, the eventual replacement, the warranty extension, the refrigerant recharge, and the monthly utility share tied to running the machine. A $300 buried pipe threatens every single line on that list. It replaces the equipment. It eliminates the repair cycle. It has no refrigerant to sell, and it is completely invisible to your utility meter, which is precisely why it disappeared from your contractor's manual the moment the gas industry had enough political leverage to make that happen. In March of 2020, the American Gas Association held an internal planning meeting. The minutes from that meeting became public through investigative reporting. In those minutes, the association explicitly named passive thermal alternatives as an existential threat to natural gas use in residential buildings. Their stated response was not to compete. It was to bury. What followed is documented legislation. Since 2020, the gas industry and its aligned trade groups pushed preemption bills through more than 25 state legislatures. Those bills prevent cities and towns from encouraging, incentivizing, or even permitting passive thermal systems through local building code. When researchers ran the text of those bills through plagiarism software, the results were difficult to explain. Nearly identical language appeared across Utah, Texas, Arizona, and Louisiana, introduced by different legislators within weeks of each other. One Utah representative, when asked directly where the bill originated, admitted he became aware of it through his local gas supplier. The cooling industry trade body, representing nearly every major residential air conditioning manufacturer in the country, spent decades blocking any building code category that would classify a passive earth-coupled cooling pipe as a recognized alternative. No category means no approval pathway. No approval pathway means no contractor will install it. And if no contractor will install it, the average homeowner never hears about it. That is how you erase a free technology without ever passing a law that explicitly bans it. There is one objection to earth tube systems that appears in every modern building science paper, and it deserves a direct answer rather than a dismissal. The argument is straightforward. Warm, humid outside air enters a cool pipe. The temperature drops. Water vapor condenses on the interior wall. In a poorly designed system, that condensate pools at the low points and becomes a breeding ground for mold and microbial growth. Cooling industry consultants love this argument, and in a poorly designed system, they are completely correct. The condensation is real. The biology that follows it is real. Both can compromise a system within its second summer if the pipe is built without attention to drainage. The solution, however, is older than the objection. The Amish resolved this before any university measured it. The pipe must slope continuously from the house end down toward the outdoor intake, with no low points anywhere along its length where water can collect. A drop of 1 inch per 10 feet is sufficient. That works out to just under 1% grade. The intake end sits over a drainage point, either a gravel bed in older installations or a simple trap and cleanout in modern ones. Once the slope is correct and the drain is in place, any condensate that forms runs out of the pipe before it has any opportunity to pool. The European Passive House Institute ran a 5-year continuous operation study on properly drained earth tube systems across multiple Central European climates. Air samples pulled from the pipe outlets at the end of year 5 showed microbiological activity statistically indistinguishable from ordinary outdoor ambient air. The systems were clean. The mold objection is a design problem, not a technology problem. It is solved permanently by a 1-inch drop every 10 feet and nothing more. The materials list for a system that will outlast 2 furnaces and 3 air conditioners is almost offensive in its simplicity. 40 feet of 8-inch smooth bore polyvinyl chloride pipe runs between $60 and $90 at any hardware store. A screened intake cap costs $12. A standard inline duct fan, which moves air through the pipe continuously at a slow and steady rate, runs between $40 and $70 and draws roughly the same electricity as a single light bulb. A drain trap at the low end is another $8. A box of pipe couplings and primer brings the total to somewhere under $250 in parts. The only other cost is a walk-behind trencher rented from any equipment yard for approximately $120 for a half day. That machine cuts a 40-foot trench, 4 feet deep, through an average suburban yard in roughly 2 hours. The installation sequence is not complicated. Drop the pipe into the trench and slope it continuously toward the outdoor intake. Connect the indoor end to your existing cold air return duct. Cut a rectangular opening in the return, flange the pipe end, and seal the joint with duct mastic. Install the inline fan. Cap the outdoor end with the screened intake. Backfill the trench. Start to finish, this is a weekend project for one competent person with no trade background and no permits required in most states, because the system is legally categorized as passive ventilation rather than heating or cooling equipment. That is the quiet regulatory gap that every preemption bill forgot to close. For homes using window units or mini splits instead of central air, the earth tube feeds a dedicated ventilation register in 1 or 2 rooms. The compressor only handles the last few degrees of cooling and runs a fraction as often. The electric bill reflects the difference within a single summer. There is one performance detail that no mechanical cooling salesman will ever volunteer. An earth tube in its first summer runs at a baseline level of efficiency. By the second summer, the surrounding soil has thermally adjusted around the pipe, and the system runs approximately 8% more efficiently. By the third summer, it reaches peak performance and holds that ceiling for the entire life of the installation, which is typically measured in decades. A compressor starts degrading the day it is switched on. A buried pipe gets better. The cooling industry spent decades and hundreds of millions of dollars ensuring this never reached your contractor's manual. The physics is 3 centuries old. The federal blueprint was published in 1947. The build cost $300 and one weekend. The operating cost for the rest of the life of the house is zero. No refrigerant, no repair cycle, no monthly bill, just a pipe, a slope, and a drain. If that kind of permanent, ungovernable self-sufficiency is something you want more of, subscribe and share this video. Then watch our paired video on the solar chimney, the system that moves the air your earth tube already cooled.